Good evening, enemies of the state. It is Wednesday, August 26th at 10:48 p.m. I'm trying to do a short follow-up, episode 3, part 2. We've recorded some material, more on the Matt Taibbi article. Going to abandon that enterprise, leave that on the cutting room floor, maybe for posterity to research and find out what those missing minutes were all about. Because I think we have to go back even further. Like, this is sort of the project that was talking about is these inferential distances between people as they try to have debates about topics like this, about politics, and how far apart they really are. My mother mentions in the comment on part one of this of episode 3, where she says, "What difference does it make who does the rationing, insurance executives or government lackeys?" My mom says, and my brother made a voicemail last week, and he said, rationing exists. It's an unavoidable fact. So who would you want to do the rationing? Would you want, just a guy in a cubicle that you'll never even heard of, or do you want a panel who's appointed by the political process and subject to, I guess elections, or subject to electing officials who will then appoint them? And that's really how far apart we are. Like, because my answer is, one, it makes all the difference in the world whether the rationing is done by insurance executives or whether it's done by government lackeys. And two, I would rather have the guy, the bureaucrat in the cubicle, like the insurance bureaucrat in the cubicle, or the insurance employee in the cubicle, trying to get through his day, than the political panel people who think they have what the means and the necessary recommendations and intelligence to sort of direct millions and millions of lives in a way that sort of they see fit. Because I think that the what matters is the rules, incentives, and institutions, and government as an institution is the wrong has the wrong incentives and has the wrong rules, and so you can't trust them to ever get outcomes. My mom mentions that, and the Matt Taibbi article talks about how the Gang Six is in the back pockets of these insurance companies or the insurance lobby. The people don't matter, right? They're interchangeable. Anybody who would have done what it takes to get into those positions in Congress would behave the same way. That's what they do to get into a position of power. Ron Paul got into Congress, but he obviously doesn't have any positions of power. He doesn't chair any committees, and he sort of kept out of that. And he doesn't get donations from lobbyists and corporate. He actually has to go far and wide and develop a network of nationwide donors just to compete in the local elections in his district in Texas. So that's the difference. He's a sort of different animal, but people who sort of influence these debates and have these things, there's no difference. It's not going to change if you change the name of the person occupying that seat. They will behave in similar ways, and maybe even worse ways than what they're behaving in now. So yeah, rationing exists, but most things get rationed by the price system, and that is a morally neutral way to do it. We may not like the outcomes of that. We might not feel that uh, it's right that some people can't afford certain things, but the prices didn't do that to them, right? The prices themselves that are derived that are the output of the millions of interactions, billions of interactions daily of people that are what determine prices has a neutral component in a way that a government process can never be, right? This is that now we have humans with their own drives, desires, friends, biases, uh, making determinations, whereas the price system is sort of a black box that inputs come in, people make decisions about how much of this they need, how much they can save on this, what they can do with and what they can do without. And as those interactions add up, prices change. And that's the system that seems to work, and it's responsive automatically. And individuals decide, they say no, right? Like, no, I can't afford to go to the movies today. Like, I want to save my money. Or no, I can't. I'd like to go to a sit-down restaurant for lunch, but I'll just eat at my desk. Um, face those trade-offs, and even those private decisions make things adjust, and people will and an equilibrium is found, and the world gets better, and entrepreneurs respond to uh, this this uh, these millions of interactions. It's a pretty impressive system, and so I don't like tampering with it because I see how much good it's done. But it's about being able to say no, and politicians can't say no. Even when they mean no, they can't say no. Even when they know the answer is no, they won't say no to their constituents because they face a different set of incentives. They face a different set of rules. They don't get reelected or they don't get votes by telling constituents no, you're being silly. Like we can't afford that, or it just doesn't work like that. John Stossel had his article says, families everywhere, every day they tell their children no, or every day they have to tell themselves no. We can't indulge in that, in this or that. But politicians seem to have lost that, or never had that faculty, or are afraid to ever express it. So, yeah, if you ask me, wouldn't you want this or this? And I said, yeah, I want the private system. I want the state out of it. Uh, the fact that I even sit here and podcast should be proof enough. But so that is a large issue. But rationing exists and uh, won't ever go away as long as scarcity exists, as long as opportunity cost exists, as long as trade-offs exist. People will have to make choices. Other people may not be happy with the choices people have to make, and we can certainly all lament the fact that our budget constraints are very tight, and some people are won't be able to afford certain things, but government's not the solution to that, and wealth redistribution is not the solution to that. The solution to that is innovation, technology, production, stronger property rights. That's what worked to make people wealthy. It's not the fact that the state exists to keep their eye on people or their thumbs on people. And then just want to mention the work of Robin Hanson and even some of the broader health economics literature and the puzzles that exist in healthcare expenditure. The Rand Health study from the 70s, early 80s, where they were sort of and the follow-ups that have done on that sort of still confirm that this is going on. That in the United States, you could half total healthcare spending. You could cut it in half, and you wouldn't change health outcomes. So health economists understand that there's so much more to a person's health than how much medical intervention or how much medical attention they get, how much hospitalization they get, and things that are much more important: sanitary conditions, having a high status job, being a high status person as opposed to being a low status person, being somebody that people look up to. Is better for your health than being somebody who people look down on, and that's very bad for your health. Getting 7 hours of sleep, getting a certain amount of exercise, these are bigger determinants on health than actual medical care, because a lot of medical expense, a lot of medical care that we get, a lot of doctor's visits are either do no good, right? You would have got better anyway. They just gave you a placebo. So a lot of this we're expending. The test was probably like the doctor knew the test was going to come up inconclusive, or not necessarily inconclusive, or negative. The test was going to come up negative, but they ordered it anyway. And then there's plenty of downright medical expense that is harmful. You're going to get a medical intervention, and it will do more harm than good. So there is a lot of that type of medicine around. And so some of the health proposals and reform proposals are for this evidence-based medicine, panels to determine the efficacy of treatments, probabilities, and for administering tests, which people are mad about because that's rationing, but probably necessary. But who should make the decision? I think the price system should inform the individual consumers about the decisions they make. And so when my mother asks, who do you want making decisions, government lackeys or insurance executives, I want the people who are going to be actually on the front lines and listening to the information that they get from the price system. I want people who are looking at prices, who are looking at prices change, who are looking at prices shift, and who are making decisions based on that. And then consumers, if you have a layer of insurance, then consumers get to look at the cost of their premiums, because the premiums change as the price of medicine changes, and then plans would change, saying, well, we cover this and we don't cover that. And so if you want the premium, if you want the policy that does cover this, you pay XYZ premium. If you don't care about that, then you can pay this premium. That's made even that little convoluted transaction is made additionally convoluted by the fact that individuals are not picking amongst the range, not picking amongst the full range of options because their employers have picked for them. So, or have sort of either picked one plan or zero plans or 2 or 3 plans that you can choose from, which adds a layer of complexity and problems that can be reformed away. That we should be all able to agree that employers have, your job status has nothing to do with what medical insurance you should be buying. So, but again, this isn't what the government. Some people in the government are talking about that, sort of giving the tax-free status, in the pre-tax expense for companies to purchase insurance, and then families. And I would favor reform in that direction, but obviously, I would favor reform that decouples insurance from employment, but obviously with the end goal being that the state has nothing to. The state remains silent on matters of healthcare, health policy, health insurance, everything. But I think the most unique insight that Robin Hanson has is this insight that why we are so focused on medical care, why we care about medical expenses so much, is something that we don't know consciously, but when we look at all the data, all the puzzles from health economics, all the strange things that exist in care, all the ideas that we pay for the care that is actually harmful, and we really don't want people to act. We do want people to be insulated from their own healthcare costs. We don't want people to pay their own way. What's going on there? The theory that Robin Hanson puts out is that medical expenses and health care and health insurance is about signaling that we care about our social allies, right? So medical expenses is about showing that you care. He's the paper. Again, I'll put a link, but the gist of the idea, the gist of the concept that medicine is about showing that you care can be is demonstrated in a part of War and Peace, in Tolstoy's War and Peace. I'm going to read an excerpt, but I think this exemplifies the idea of what doctors do, what patients want doctors to do, why families care, and why we care about the larger social circle that we sort of consider our social lives. But here's an excerpt from War and Peace. Natasha's illness was so serious that, fortunately for her and for her parents, the consideration of all that had caused the illness, her conduct, and the breaking off of her engagement receded into the background. She was so ill that it was impossible for them to consider in how far she was to blame for what had happened. She could not eat or sleep. She grew visibly thinner. She coughed, and as the doctors made them feel, was in danger. They could not think of anything but how to help her. Doctors came to see her singly and in consultation. They talked much in French, German, and Latin, blamed one another, and prescribed a great variety of medicines for all the diseases known to them, but the simple idea never occurred to any of them that they could not know the disease Natasha was suffering from, as no disease suffered by a live man can be known, for every living person has his own peculiarities and always has his own peculiar, personal, novel, complicated disease unknown to medicine, not a disease of the lungs, liver, skin, heart, nerves, and so on mentioned in medical books, but a disease consisting of one of the innumerate combinations of maladies of those organs. The simple thought could not occur to the doctors, as it cannot occur to a wizard that he is unable to work his charms, because the business of their lives was to cure, and they received money for it, and had spent the best years of their lives on that business. But above all, that thought was kept out of their minds by the fact that they saw that they were really useful, as in fact they were to the whole Rostov family. Their usefulness did not depend on making the patient swallow substances, for the most part harmful, but the harm was scarcely perceptible as they were given in small doses, but that they were useful, necessary, and indispensable because they satisfied a mental need of the invalid and of those who loved her, and that is why they are, and always will be, pseudo-healers, wise women, homeopaths, and allopaths. They satisfied that elemental human need for hope of relief, for sympathy, and that something should be done, which is felt by those who are suffering. They satisfy the need seen in its most elementary form in a child when it wants to have a place rubbed that has been hurt. A child knocks itself and runs at once to the arms of its mother or nurse to have the aching spot rubbed or kissed, and it feels better when this is done. The child cannot believe that the strongest and the wisest of its people have no remedy for its pain, and the hope of relief and the expression of its mother's sympathy while she rubs the bump comforts it. The doctors were of no use to Natasha because they kissed and rubbed her bump, assuring her. No, excuse me. The doctors were of use to Natasha because they kissed and rubbed her bump, assuring her that it would soon pass if only the coachman went to the chemist's in the Arbat and got a powder and some pills in a pretty box for a ruble and 70 kopecks, and if she took those powders in boiled water at intervals of precisely 2 hours, neither more nor less. What would Sonia and the Count and Countess have done? How would they have looked if nothing had been done? If there had not been those pills to give by the clock, the warm drinks, the chicken cutlets, and all the other details of life ordered by the doctors, the carrying out of which supplied an occupation and consolation to the family's circle? How would the Count have borne his dearly loved daughter's illness had he not known it was costing him 1,000 rubles, and that he would not grudge 1,000 more to benefit her, and had he not known that if for her illness continued, he would not grudge yet another 1,000, and would take her abroad for consultations there, and had he not been able to explain the details of how Metvir and Feller had not understood the symptoms, but Friess had, and Mudrov had diagnosed them even better, what would the Countess have done, had she not been able to sometimes to scold the invalid for not strictly obeying the doctor's orders? "You'll never get well like that," she would say, forgetting her grief in the vexation. "If you won't obey your doctor, and take your medicine at the right time, you mustn't trifle with it, you know, or it may turn into pneumonia," she would go on, deriving much comfort from the utterance of that foreign word incomprehensible to others as well as to herself. What would Sonia have done without the glad consciousness that she had undressed during the first 3 nights, in order to be ready to carry out all the doctor's injunctions with precision, and that she still kept awake at night, so as not to miss the proper time when the slightly harmful pills in the little gilt box had to be administered? Even to Natasha herself, it was pleasant to see that so many sacrifices were being made for her sake, and to know that she had to take medicine at certain hours, though she declared that no medicine would cure her, and that it was all nonsense. And it was even pleasant to be able to show, by disregarding the orders, that she did not believe in medical treatment and did not value her life. The doctor came every day, felt her pulse, looked at her tongue, and regardless of her grief-stricken face, joked with her. But when he had gone into another room, to which the Countess Hurley followed him, he assumed a grave air, and thoughtfully shaking his head, said that though there was danger, he had hopes of the effect of the last medicine, and one must wait and see, and that the malady was chiefly mental, and the Countess, trying to conceal the action from herself and from him, slipped a gold coin into his hand, and always returned to the patient with a more tranquil mind. The symptoms of Natasha's illness were that she ate little, slept little, coughed, and was always low-spirited. The doctors said that she could not get on without medical treatment, so they kept her in the stifling atmosphere of the town, and the Rostovs did not move to the country that summer of 1812. In spite of the many pills she swallowed, and the drops and powders out of the little boxes, and the boxes which Madame Schoss, who was fond of such things, made a large collection, and in spite of being deprived of the country life to which she was accustomed, youth prevailed. Natasha's grief began to be overlaid by the impressions of daily life. It ceased to press painfully on her heart, and it gradually faded into the past, and she began to recover physically. So Robin Hanson uses that excerpt in his health econ class, and I think that sort of describes a lot of it. That we have of our loved ones and our family and our other broader social allies, and when we see them in distress, we can really show how much we care about them by how much effort we put, how much expense we go to, um, how much trouble we go to in trying to make them feel better, um, when in fact maybe there's not a lot that can be done, and more is we're finding that it's possible to do more and more and to correct more and more things, but it's expensive to do, right? We could, and so that's another little disingenuous thing about Matt Taibbi's article. He sort of says that's the worst healthcare system, it's the dumbest, but survival rates for in America for people who contract diseases, um, cancer survival rates higher than every other country. Michael Moore, when he did the healthcare movie, what's it called? I can't remember. That he goes around sort of saying, "Look, the life expectancy in Britain is higher, and the life expectancy in France is higher. Mortality is lower in these countries, but that's due to a lot of other things, right? They have less murder, they have less teen crime, they have less obesity, they have less. The word I was looking for. They have they engage in less risky behaviors. They don't. They're not like extreme sportists. All as many, not as many hunters, not as many accidents. They don't drive as many miles in cars, so they have a higher mortality, but or a higher life expectancy and a lower mortality. But when you get sick, if you compare people who get sick in both countries, the place where you want to get sick is not France, it's not Britain. The place where you want to get sick is the United States. That's where people can cure you. So it's very strange all around. But I think there's a lot of other healthcare causes that can be sorted out and um, only explained by the fact that this rising expense is because we are trying to signal how much we care about of these other people, and we fight so hard for this health insurance because we're trying to point out we love our social allies, we care so much, we need everybody to be able to get this um, access to medicine. Everybody, when they fall ill, must have pills around the clock and doctors giving them menstruation and yeah, I don't know. I think people sort of have to sort of take responsibility for themselves. You want cost control. Somebody's got to learn to say no. I prefer the person saying no and making decisions to be the closest to the actual patient and hopefully the patient themselves. And they can decide, yes, I want that treatment. No, I don't want that treatment. Um, yeah, I don't need to go to the doctor now. This time I do need to go to the doctor. Maybe your wives will nag you, and you'll have your other social allies nagging you to get more care because they want to show that they care. And part of it, I'm sorry, but they do care, but they also really want to. Not only do they care, but they want to show that they care. So Mises talked about it too. Mises talked about the will to health. Um, and that state subsidization of disease or disease management and healthcare eroded the will to health. So if you were not insulated from the expenses of medical care, you would be in some sense more willing to get sick. Uh, then you would you would engage in less risky behavior. You might maybe even wash your hands more. Who knows what it is? Avoid germs more scrupulously. Um, then if you had perfect uh, insulation from the cost of getting sick. And so Mises said that there's a moral hazard, just as all insurance companies comes with a moral hazard. Health insurance comes with a moral hazard, and it erodes the will to sickness. I think that's. So my point is, we're very far apart from health insurance, government health care. I think some of the answer is always, as always, yeah, okay, you can try that. Like, try it. Have a collective of healthcare. just count me out. Like, you stop using my stuff to do it. If you have enough people to get this together, you can start your cooperative or mutual insurance company. But that's not what the politicians want. That's not what even the political pundits and the policy wonks want to be able to say to their friends, "Well, I'm determining the fate of 325 million Americans, and I'm getting to control the ones who even involuntarily I make them do it." So, and here so here's government rationing. This is just an anecdote. Anecdotes aren't data, but there's a story in the Daily Telegraph about the National Health Service in Britain, which is the single payer government-run healthcare. But here's non-price rationing. Doctors have launched a campaign on behalf of a war hero who has been told that he must go blind in one eye before he can receive an NHS treatment, and accused Gordon Brown of incompetence in managing the health service. More than 120 doctors have sent £5 checks to Downing Street, made out to the Prime Minister in the hope of shaming him into helping former RAF bomber Jack Tagg. The 88-year-old was recently diagnosed with age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of blindness in Britain, which affects an estimated 500,000 people. Mr. Tagg has the treatable but most aggressive wet form of the disease, which can lead to the loss of central vision in as little as 2 months. But he's been told by the NHS will only fund the injections which could save his sight after he has lost the vision in one eye. They told me there were 3 choices: let nature take its course, go blind, try to seek funding, or pay for immediate treatment. Time is of the essence, so we opted to pay up and fight for funding. This is happening to literally millions of people. It's appalling, and something has got to be done about it. So then Doug Bandow at Cato Institute on the Cato at Liberty blog says, the American medical system needs reform, but that should be accomplished by promoting patient-directed care with individuals and families rather than government deciding how to best use scarce resources when it comes to medical treatment. The other thing I wanted to mention in the podcast before I wrap up, everybody should check out Snitching blog. It's obviously off the healthcare debate. Pretty much, we can continue to talk about healthcare, but it's healthcare policy is the same to me as national shirt policy or national chicken ordering policy, national Kentucky Fried Chicken policy. Like, we should have more Kentucky Fried Chicken. Oh, no, we should have less Kentucky Fried Chicken. These are private matters between doctors and patients and insurance companies and business, and they don't belong in the sphere of the state. Nobody is using violence in healthcare or properly. Nobody is using violence in the insurance companies aren't being violent to anybody in any way. They're not aggressing on them. They're not abrogating property rights or so. Where does the state even make this claim that except for the fact that the state thinks it owns your body, right? The state thinks it owns your health, it owns your body, it owns your children, in their form as future tax slaves, and you as a tax slave. They think they have a right to your body because they can draft you. They think they can draft you and send you to fight in wars. So the government does think it owns your body, but I don't think it does, and it probably doesn't. So they shouldn't have any interest in the health of your body either. So, except for the larger social issue that, as a society or whatever kind of social alliance we think we want to form, we have this innate desire to show that we care. And so one of the ways we show we care is force everybody to accept all the care that we have for them. Snitching blog is a new blog. An attorney, California, what university she's with. I don't have it up on my screen right now, but check it out. This is about the abuses in the justice system that go on in the informant networks, how informants are used, how because they turn over evidence to prosecutors, that some very heinous crimes can get overlooked or forgiven, and or to make these drug cases that people will get murdered and murderers will stay out on the street just because they're giving information to DAs. Then the prison snitching networks, which is big business, prisoners, trade files, trade cases, just as something to do all day, and then they get their sentence lightened from that. So, snitching blog might be something you want to check. But then this was one thing I mentioned in last night's podcast. Chris Edwards at Cato at Liberty points out that federal pay continues its rapid ascent. The Bureau of Economic Analysis has released its annual data on compensation levels by industry. The data shows that the pay advantage enjoyed by federal civilian workers over private sector workers continues to expand. The George W. Bush years were very lucrative for federal workers. In 2000, the average compensation, wages, and benefits of federal workers was 66% higher than the average compensation in the private sector. The new data show that the average federal compensation is now more than double the average in the private sector. In 2008, the average wages for 1.9 million federal civilian workers was $79,197, which compared to an average of $49,935 for the nation's 108 million private sector workers, measured in full-time equivalents. The figure shows that federal pay advantage is steadily increasing. In 2008, federal worker compensation, which is wages and benefits, averaged a remarkable $119,982, which was more than double the federal private sector average of $59,909. What's going on here? I'm still quoting Chris Edwards, Cato at Liberty. What's going on here? Members of Congress who have large numbers of federal workers in their districts relentlessly push for expanding federal worker compensation. Also, the Bush administration had little interest in fiscal restraint, and it usually got rolled by the federal unions. The result has been an increasingly overpaid elite of government workers who are insulated from the economic reality of recessions and from the tough competitive climate of the private sector. It's time to put a stop to this. Federal wages should be frozen for a period of years, at least until the private sector economy has recovered and average workers start seeing some wage gains of their own. At the same time, gold-plated federal benefit packages should be scaled back as unaffordable given today's massive budget deficits. There are many qualitative benefits of government work, such as extremely high government security, so taxpayers should not have to pay for such lavish government pay packages. That's Chris Edwards sort of calling for a wage freeze, but obviously the answer is they should all be fired. That whatever job they're doing should be being done in a private industry and on a private basis. But that difference is stark. I mean, $120,000 wages and benefits for a federal employee as opposed to $60,000 working in the private sector, wages and benefits, without having any nearly the same, prestige. Or let's wrap up for tonight. I hope that was a little instructive, but I hope we sort of see where I'm coming from, which is very far away from where a lot of other people seem to be coming from, because we have such a fundamental disagreement, because our disagreement is so huge, perhaps we shouldn't be in the same political unit. Right? Maybe we don't want to be in the same political unit, and maybe you don't want me in your political unit. So just stop sending taxes. I must stop calling the fire department or whatever. And that should do it. Hopefully next week, Matt will be back. We'll get back to a regular scheduled reassessing the presidency, historical interpretation of different events in government, revisionist history. So stay tuned. Keep writing. Keep commenting. Scott at enemiesofstate.net. If you want to email me or the comments page, I'll check them out periodically throughout the day. Maybe respond there. Maybe just hit up the response in the podcast. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for listening. Bye.